Hello, and a warm welcome from Canada, where we acknowledge that we live and work on unceded and unsurrendered Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory here in Ottawa. We would also like to acknowledge the support of the Ontario Arts Council and thank Judith Parker, who joined us as curatorial collaborator, offering her feedback and objective experience.
Cynthia and I met while working in long-term care, a large 450-bed facility for both veterans and community members. We were both hired as practicing artists to engage with the residents and to animate life at the end of life. Together, we have spent over 40 years working in a healthcare setting. Through discussion, we discovered commonalities in our artwork, and we decided to explore our experience in healthcare through this collaboration.
I have always used my art practice to process life's emotions. Now it is even more important to process the stress of working in healthcare, to physically transfer my emotions into clay.
My experience of working with the frail elderly and those at the end of their days has profoundly informed my art-making practice. It has fine-tuned my perception of the subtleties of frailty and what it is to approach death. Cynthia has continued to work throughout the pandemic, and I have noticed the toll it has taken on her to engage with the elderly as she does.
We began this collaboration with monthly conversations, and this turned into developing our ideas. After about 6 months, we hit our stride in making I Am Made of Her and She Remembers Me. Using my collection of individual clay flowers, leaves, and seeds, Barbara and I built this shrouded body form. This was the first time we directly addressed death in our collaboration.
She Remembers Me suggests the body finding its way back to the earth. The shrouded figure is set on a small hill referencing prehistoric burial mounds. While making this piece, we had the experience of being led by the creative process. It was a strange and intriguing experience that went beyond our planning. An idea presented itself, and we simply followed. It was one of those remarkable days in our practice as artists.
Through conversation and experimentation, we developed techniques to marry our two mediums, working on themes between ephemerality and being earthbound. Photography is based on colored light, there but not, creating images that are not quite tangible. Clay is earthbound. It is physical in nature, tangible to hold, fragile, bone-like, and even might be dead.
We explore the idea of ephemerality with the use of projected photographs onto clay sculptures, which give the illusion of something not quite there. We all know about death, or we think we know about death. This installation raises the question and creates a space that is less solid, less concrete, less knowable, and introduces a softening, a sense of uncertainty around the knowing of death.
Gone but Still Here is a projected photographic image onto a large sculptural clay flower. The focus of this piece is the strength of the shadow, to suggest that we carry an awareness of death in our full colored experience of life. This is the flower without the photographic projection. As I was learning to make such a large piece, a resident under my care, Colbert, was actively dying. Each petal was formed with Colbert in mind. I destroyed the first version as it was too emotionally charged. The making of this flower has helped to physically locate my grief and is now a touchstone to my memory of Colbert.
So below as above is an inversion of the famous quote. The image speaks to the awareness of how both life and death are held in the same moment in the garden in early spring. By changing the orientation of the picture plane from vertical to horizontal, it mimics the posture of the dead.
We incorporated root forms into the photographic image by aggressively punching the paper. The image is balanced precariously on the clay roots, and the sharp edge of the paper defines that line between above ground and below ground, or between life and death.
Earth Memories is a two-sided image. This piece considers how we impact the earth with our presence. The body impression is preparing or previewing our eventual death and return to the earth. This is the other side of the grass image. The roots of small flowers are penetrating through the body, concentrating around the heart area. Might this be what it is to be alive with an awareness of death? We each make an impression upon the earth, but how are we impacted by the earth? This image might lead you to wonder how the earth makes an impression on the living.
Suggesting the notion of a journey, this spiraling installation, Whispering Garden, offers the viewer an interactive experience.
Similar to being in the forest and discovering a secret passage, the viewer is held within the experience. On the outside of Whispering Garden, the image is in sharp focus. Once inside, the image is subtler, thinner, paler. The viewer follows a spiral path to the center and back out again, introducing the concept of a journey through a somatic experience. Whispering Garden is an immersive experience in nature, a way to imagine the quality of approaching an unknowable journey. As the viewer passes either inside or outside the structure, the thin silk fabric moves or breathes in response to the presence of the viewer. Unending. We wanted to work with the wreath form as it is often used in funeral rites. The wreath suggests eternity with its unending circle. This still life image was made using flowers from a funeral and incorporates Cynthia's white floral sculptures. This is not the final image as we felt the wreath form needed to be further obscured.
Here's the final version, where the wreath form is harder to distinguish in the photograph. It's paired with my clay wreath which rests on a mirror. Much of my work is based on being influenced by people, places, and their customs. Traveling to hotter parts of the world, I enjoy visiting graveyards where people are buried in crypts above ground, with clay wreaths and photographs of the dead displayed. The clay wreath has life's full color, but it's only beneath the white of the porcelain. The use of the mirror suggests a place between this life and the next. As the viewer looks into the mirror, they see their own reflection within the wreath. The experience invites the viewer to question their own mortality.
We wanted to introduce the element of time and so created a video installation. We are aware that installation photographs are challenging to understand as you're not standing in the gallery space. The video begins with the image of a person walking down a path in a forest. They are walking towards a patch of light in the distance. As they move away from the viewer, they become smaller and smaller and eventually fade from view. Death is a form of leave-taking. Gently, the figure is engulfed by light. As the projected video image fades to white, it illuminates the hand-drawn landscape below.
This landscape is drawn with raw clay, applied directly to the wall. Clay, as an element of earth, when dry, it is very fragile. So slowly over time, the image will flake off the wall and disappear. Within the exhibition, we wanted to create a quiet place for reflection. Columbarium, a consequence of life, is a modern interpretation of a storage place for ashes. Columbarium comes from the Latin columba, meaning dove or pigeon. A dovecote is where each bird may rest. Now our own dead may rest.
We developed each piece with a person we have known personally in mind who has died and whose memory we continue to carry. I started with family members and then added residents with whom I'd worked in long-term care.
We introduced the idea of the dovecote by drawing a grid of graphite lines directly onto the wall. This defines the space into squares in which each piece may reside. We recognize that each of us carries the memory of our dead. Barbara and I acknowledge that the exhibition may have stirred up some strong memories and emotions. We offer the viewer a place to participate by writing a note to a loved one who has died. By placing the rolled up note within the small clay niche, it becomes a memorial act. Some empty spaces suggest the possibility of a place for you and I as well.
Ancestral Roots. Recently, I have been doing some genealogical research. I have come to an awareness of the layers of dead we are connected to beyond those we know personally. We know some family members through stories and photographs in old albums. Others we know only by the name on a grave. There are so many people we are related to, yet have no knowledge of. In this image, the green leaves represent our body above ground, where it can flourish, tended to and supported by our unseen ancestors, our roots.
In response to ancestral roots and following on the root analogy, I created Nurse Log to discuss regeneration, and together the two pieces consider the cycle of life. When a tree dies and falls in the forest, it becomes the starting point for new life. I used my own body to cast this piece. It is a reminder and a hope that I too will be carried forward into another life. Each stylized root is an individual, and together they connect to form a supportive network.
At the beginning of this collaboration, I undertook the project for my colleagues in long-term care, and in the process healed myself. I used to have the feeling of being burdened by the memory of all the dead I carry. But during the making of this work, something shifted, and I now feel honored to carry their memory. It is both a great privilege and a huge burden to work with those at end of life. No one tells you when you begin this work that you will be changed, and you are. The trick is not to become overwhelmed by the experience, but rather to be worn down and polished in the way great beauty is revealed when a stone is skillfully cut and ground.
Through the experience of this collaboration with Barbara and working through the pandemic, I have come to realize how imperative it is to have community within the institution of care. The pandemic brought caregivers together in a way that hadn't happened before. We united in an effort to fight the pandemic and to keep our residents safe. This work is both important and greatly undervalued.
This talk has been based on our 2-year collaboration, which is currently on exhibition at the Agnes Jameson Gallery in Minden, Ontario. Thank you for your attention, and we would be happy to field questions and to hear your response to the work.